Yeah. So today you're reading an excerpt from The Questionable Acts of an American Gentleman, which sets up a lot of fun tension in the title alone because we've got American gentlemen coming in. So I'm just going to read the blurb for readers to set up the book. Lady Mercy never imagined an early morning chance encounter in Hyde Park with Jack Kincaide would tempt her to betray her betrothed. The mysterious American ignites a passion in Mercy that leads her to question the practical arrangements she made with her dear childhood friend, the Duke of Peyton. Would she really give it all up for Jack? What she doesn't know is Jack has a shocking secret, and their chance encounter is really the first step in his ruthless plan of revenge against the Duke. Jack is so close to getting his revenge. Still, he can't deny his immediate connection with Mercy or his unexpected feelings for her that grow deeper as they continue to spend time together. The more time they spend together, the more Jack questions his ruthless choices and how Mercy will see them when his secrets are revealed. Is he capable of being a better man? Can he walk away from his desire for revenge? As he questions his choices, his explosive secret is revealed, devastating Mercy and shocking all of London. So that's a very exciting book setup. Ramona, would you like to tell us a little bit about the scene you're going to read?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to read a scene that takes place between Jack Kincaide and his siblings. They're headed over to England on a ship and they're talking about their plans, and the actual Mercy will come up in that scene as well. So that's what I'm going to read.
Awesome.
So go ahead and get started. Thanks. All right. Jack Kincaide spun the glass of amber liquid between his fingers as he sat with his siblings in the saloon on the SS Delphin. They were more than halfway through their journey to England. He started to say something to his siblings when a man dashed by covering his mouth. His lips twitched in disdain at the man's weak stomach. Ocean travel wasn't for everyone, he thought to himself. They were seated in the back corner of the room, and Jack ordered the staff to make sure they were left undisturbed. Normally, his brother Sam spent the evening charming passengers, but Jack wasn't up for it tonight. He could only tolerate so much of the mingling, and he was at his limit. A mother and her daughter started making their way over to them, and Jack fixed his cool blue eyes on them. The mother quickly turned her daughter in the opposite direction. You know, being less frightening wouldn't hurt, Sam said dryly. Jack shrugged. You won't be so nonchalant when you scare away all of our customers, Sophia, his youngest sibling piped up. He raised an eyebrow at her, but she just smiled back at him. He hated the pomp that went with traveling on one of their passenger vessels. Kincaide Travel owned some of the finest passenger vessels on the Atlantic Ocean, and as their success grew, his dislike for their elite passengers grew. Whenever he or his siblings were on the vessels, passengers wanted to spend all of their time with them. He found insincerity in anyone annoying and long ago stopped participating in such conversations. Not all his siblings were so unfriendly, he thought, glancing at both Sam and Sophia. They were all so different, even Annie, who was his only true blood relation. Sam and Sophia came along later, but he would do anything for them. Yes, he may be cold, but the people who mattered most in his life always knew that he would move heaven and earth to protect them. He contemplated both his sisters sitting across from him. They were both dressed in the finest evening wear, but so drastically different from each other. Annie, his practical sister, was slender with his same ebony hair and deep blue eyes, while Sophia, the dreamer, was petite with red wavy hair. And Sam, well, he was something else altogether. He didn't know a lady who wasn't easily charmed by his lazy smile, blonde hair, and strapping frame. Jack rolled his eyes as his brother smiled at a lady sitting across the room. Yes, Jack could admit it to himself. He was the least friendly of their makeshift family. Are we all prepared to go forward with the plan? Annie asked them. They were on the verge of setting their plan in motion. The voyage over to England was only the beginning. The next steps were to ruin his uncle's family, who had taken everything from them, and reclaim their inheritance. Jack felt the rage within him simmer, but he kept it under control, refusing to show any emotion. He learned a long time ago, thanks to Mrs. Sewald, that it didn't benefit him to show his anger. I'm bored with this question, Annie, he said. We are almost to England. I think we are all in agreement. She nodded, satisfied with his answer. They waited 22 years for revenge. Without thinking, Jack touched his father's ring where it lay hidden in his jacket. He and Annie had been through so much since the day they were abandoned at the orphanage. He would always be grateful that those years brought Sam into their lives. Sam, unlike them, was born on the streets of Philadelphia and had acquired a bevy of skills from an early age that helped him survive. Without him, Annie and he wouldn't have survived in the orphanage. Jack wasn't an emotional man, but one night after Sam and he were well into their cups, he had confessed as much. He could still remember Sam's shocked expression and his adamant declaration that it was Annie and he who had saved him. After plenty of arguing and more drinking, they agreed they saved each other. He shivered, remembering how grueling it was to survive within the orphanage, a hellhole that pitted children against each other to obtain the smallest scraps of food. They all had lasting scars from their time in the orphanage. For Jack and Sam, no visible scars, but that couldn't be said for Annie. He looked at her sitting across from him. She was lovely in her dark blue evening dress that cinched at her waist with an elaborate skirt that flowed around her. The dress was made of the finest fabric and lace. Still, it differed in a few ways from the cap sleeves and scoop necklines that all the ladies were wearing. The sleeves cinched at the wrist and the neckline sat high above her collarbone. He would love to say she wore her dress differently to stand out, but in truth, all her dresses were designed to hide the lasting effects of Miss Sewald's care. He clenched his jaw. Revenge and justice couldn't come soon enough. Ultimately, the Paytons were the cause of all that had happened to them. Are we sure they knew you and Annie survived the illness? Sophia asked in her light voice. Of the four of them, she was the youngest and most sheltered. Sophia didn't come into their lives until after they left the orphanage when the Kincaides adopted him, Annie, and Sam. If any of them questioned their tactics, of course it would be Sophia. Jack, Sam, and Annie often worried their sister was too kind-hearted. They knew, Annie said quietly. What do we gain from ruining them? Your cousin and aunt are still your kin, Sophia said. They meant nothing to him. He had pushed away any loving memories of his aunt and cousin long ago. What drove him? He thought about it for a moment. He wished he could tell Sophia it was justice or righting a wrong, but it was revenge that drove him. It was all he thought about as they lived in squalor, knowing that his uncle and his family lived to excess on his title. From what he learned, his cousin wasn't much different from his uncle. Everything continued to be squandered since he became the Duke. Jack felt no sympathy for him. He drank the brandy in his glass in one gulp, enjoying the way it almost numbed the rage within him. Revenge or justice? Choose the one you feel most comfortable with, Jack bit out. Sophia scrunched up her nose and looked questioningly at Annie and Sam. Annie nodded in agreement. I'm fine with revenge. I want that family to pay. When we reclaim the title for Jack, I want them left with nothing. Sam walked over to Annie and squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. I'm with them, Soph. Sophia let out an exasperated sigh, clasped her hands together. Jack knew the thought of revenge did not sit well with her. She struggled with it. Her kind heart made it difficult to support destroying anyone. Do you really think my parents, your adoptive parents, would want this for you? Yes, I think they would want you to reclaim what belongs to you, but ruining people and sending them to debtor's prison. I can't imagine you would do this if they were still alive, she said, her voice breaking slightly at the end. She was right. They would hate their plan. Still, his adoptive father, Joseph, knew about his desire for revenge. He knew it drove him. Jack pushed away the nibble of emotion that tried to pull him back from his plan. We all agree to this or we don't do it, Jack stated. The siblings were all quiet, waiting on Sophia's response. She sighed and said, I will always be with you. There's no one I love more in this world than the three of you. I just worry it will end up causing us more harm. Her chin quivered and she pursed her lips. She looked down and studied the intricate flower design on her dress. Jack shifted in his chair, uncomfortable. She was upset with them. Annie, not one for nonsense, rolled her eyes and said, out with it, Sophia. Sophia's emerald eyes flashed. She may be the nicest of them, but she never let Annie intimidate her. What if the girl? Her question startled Jack. The girl was the farthest thing from his mind. They recently learned his cousin had become betrothed, and they planned to use her for their plan. What of her? She will get hurt. Annie snorted and seemed amused by Sophia's concern over a lady of the peerage. What does it matter, Soph? They marry for money and status. She will be a duchess. Sophia frowned at her, clearly unhappy with Annie's response. Of course it would be Sophia who thought about the lady's concerns. Yes, but she will still be ruined. Again, I'm with you, but promise me that you will do your best to protect her. Jack often wondered what Sophia honestly thought of him. Yes, he needed to ruin the lady in question, and there would be a scandal, but he would take care of her, and as Annie mentioned, she would still be a duchess. Sophia, I'm not a monster. As my duchess, the lady will be under my care. She will have my protection, he said. What about love? What if she wants children? Marriage is forever, Sophia said, causing Sam and Annie to snicker. He glared at both of them. He didn't want to have this conversation with Sophia. His sister had a library full of novels focused on love. She more than any of them dreamed of love and fairy tales. Jack himself didn't require that. He didn't want her getting any crazy ideas. So he callously retorted, I imagine I will have to bed her and get her with an heir, and after that she can do what she likes. Sam and Annie doubled over in laughter, causing the people in the saloon to stare at them. Jack glared back at them until they awkwardly turned away. When he turned back, Sophia's face was almost the shade of her hair. She stared back at him, her lips pinched together with tears forming in her eyes. Jack instantly felt bad. He crossed the line with his remark. I'm sorry, that was wrong of me. I promise you she will be cherished and cared for. Annie snorted and he glared at her. I'm not a monster. Annie smiled mischievously at him. For a moment, he saw the young, bubbly girl she used to be. He loved it when she smiled. Sam was shaking his head, and Jack looked at him questioningly. Perhaps if you're going to try to woo this lady, maybe not look so harsh. Even in Philadelphia, most innocent young ladies were terrified of you, Sam joked. Jack scowled at him before throwing his head back and laughing, surprising everyone. Sam was right. He glanced at Sophia, who was still watching him with a serious frown. He sighed and said, Soph, I promise she'll want for nothing. She gathered herself and smiled mischievously at him. I hope you fall madly in love with her. He shook his head and rolled his eyes, but remained silent. He didn't want to crush Sophia's fantasies by telling her that he had seen too much to believe in fairy tales the way she did.